Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to a special Jays from the Couch podcast. We're going live right on the first day of the winter meetings, and we're going to get you all set for what should be, hopefully, fingers crossed, should be a good time to be a Blue Jays fan. We're going to talk about some wheeling and dealing possibilities. We're going to talk about some rumors and targets and all of that stuff, obviously, just to get you hyped. If you aren't hyped enough, you will be by the end of this. Thank you for tuning in, as always, to the Jays from the Couch podcast. We really appreciate it, whether you're watching our main podcast live on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, sending your questions and comments in. We love that. Thank you. It makes the show so much better, so keep those coming in. And whether you're listening to us on the audio version after the fact, we really appreciate that as well. I'm telling you, man, we've got the main podcast, we've got Sunny Side of the Dome and the On-Pack Circle, lots of Blue Jays content for you all winter, and you guys are consuming it, and we really appreciate that, so thank you so much. This week, we're going to dive right into the winter meetings, and to help me do that, I've got the usual cast of characters, the co-hosts with the mo-hosts. That's right, I said it, and I meant it. First of all, host of the On-Pack Circle, Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, it's the Feckless Wonder himself. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Shaun. How are you?
I am peachy. This is the first time that since I think in almost a month where I haven't been incredibly sick with COVID or whatever else, and I'm feeling better. So I'm very happy to be here.
Good. I just want to do a subliminal plug for the OK Baseball podcast. That it was terrific. It went live last night. It's out there, and you and Christian did a terrific job on that. You should be proud of the. You guys made the Trey Turner signing happen.
It's insane. Before we go too much into that, I want to bring in Karen here because poor Karen's waiting. She's like, guys, hello. Even Velvet's trying to get on camera here. So let's get Karen in. Sunny Side of the Dome, folks. Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Good evening, Karen. How are you?
Okay, Shaun, how are you?
I'm okay. Thank you for asking. I'm sure you've heard it all already, so I'm not going to repeat my whole health history. But what's very fascinating, Steve brought up the OK Baseball podcast, which is a new project that I've just started with Christian Rao / Sports. We're going through the entire MLB, looking at every division per episode, and looking at for starters, we'll get into the off season and stuff like that. And what's fascinating, the only reason I'm really bringing it up, aside from a shameless plug, which look for the OK Baseball podcast on YouTube and everywhere you find quality podcasts. But the other reason I bring that up is because last night we recorded our first episode finally, and Christian made a bold prediction that the Philadelphia Phillies would land themselves a massive contract and a stud shortstop in Trey Turner. And lo and behold, less than 24 hours later, the Philadelphia Phillies have Trey Turner locked up for 11 years and $300 million. And this is what's fascinating. This is what's fun about the winter meetings, right? Steve, I'll start with you. Winter meetings is where, at the very least, the groundwork is laid for potential deals. But I feel like this winter meeting, Steve, it has a different feel to it already, with Jacob deGrom going off the board to Texas and Trey Turner going to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and all of those people that want Justin Verlander to be a Blue Jay, that's not happening either. He's signing a 2-year deal with the Mets. So it's great. It's great to see what happens when you have a general manager that's actually active and makes his flights to get there on time. You can actually see deals happen and signings happen and things like that. So it's kind of fun to see how baseball should work.
Indeed. And Karen, this is where, like, as Steve said, like, general managers who are gung-ho and they've got a plan and they've got the green light to execute said plan. This is where you could have a field day, right? Like if you're Dave Dombrowski in Philadelphia or the Texas Rangers or anybody, like Steve Cohen, in the Mets, he was like, lost Jacob deGrom, we need somebody. And we need him now, and they went out and got Justin Verlander. So, Karen, this could be potentially a very exciting week for the Blue Jays.
Let's hope so. I mean, I'm waiting, as I imagine a number of other Blue Jay fans are, and I mean the first step, so to speak, trading away Hernandez, and for
Yeah,
me, the only way that works at all is to get a quality replacement, and so far there isn't a replacement. Never mind quality or otherwise.
hmm,
So they need they need at least a starting pitcher. I'm still hoping for two, and people who know more than I do, who are on the inside, seem to think that there's going to be two, which makes me very happy. So one as good enough to replace Stripling, the other one like a non-terrible fifth starter that isn't automatically giving away 20% of their games, and a quality outfielder to replace for Hernandez. I'd really like to see someone who is good at both offense and defense, and we're waiting. Anytime,
yeah.
Ross.
And I think that's a great place to start, right? Like we have so far, the off season is approximately a month long already. We're a month into it, and really, even though the Toronto Blue Jays have definitely improved their bullpen by adding Swanson, uh, they have created a big hole in their lineup and their outfield. So yes, they're doing things to improve one side, that's run prevention, which I'm sure will will probably come up a couple of times here in this episode. But focusing on run prevention, well, I mean that's all well and good. Swanson, sure, he checks that box, but then of course that means you're kind of down the offensive production as well, right? So whether we think, and there are lots of opinions as to who won the trade and whether or not Teoscar Hernandez was worth the return and all of that stuff. And really, at the end of the day, there's no point in rehashing that here and now, because I think that's a dead horse that it's beaten. But what it does do is it creates now a what next mentality, right? And I think Ross Atkins, the one thing that he has done, whether you agree with the deal or not, is he's created a sense of urgency by trading Teoscar Hernandez, and now kind of it feels like slow playing the market, letting the market develop and all of that stuff. And when you're a month without Teoscar Hernandez in the lineup, it feels like that's a really really long month. So I think maybe let's kind of start with that outfield spot. And I think that's where we'll start first. And I think probably because we're already we're gonna start right off the bat with something that we probably all don't agree on, which is why this show makes for good watching, in my opinion, anyway. But before we do that, I want to get to comments here. Rocket watching on YouTube. Hey guys, great to be able to see you all. Much love.
Hey,
Back at
Rocket.
you, Rocket. Back at you. Rocket is somebody who watches faithfully and always has a comment and an opinion to share. And if you are watching at home and you want to join Rocket in the comments, fire them on here. We'll put them up on the screen, and we'll add you to our show. So let's start with how they're going to fill this hole, this Teoscar sized hole that they have now. And of course, the first name, Steve, that comes to mind, and it comes on everybody's now, is Brandon Nimmo. And at first, before the Mets landed Justin Verlander, I said last night that they better bring back Brandon Nimmo, or the fans in New York are in a revolt. But they've got Justin Verlander. Brandon Nimmo, I think, becomes one of the most sought after names on the market. And Steve, in your mind, is that misplaced?
Yes, absolutely. And this is not just me being my usual obnoxious self. This is actually talking to friends and family that are Mets fans and live back there. That Brandon Nimmo is he's just not worth that kind of long term investment. I mean, if you were going to sign him, maybe overpay him on a 1 or 2 year deal, uh, okay. But Brandon Nimmo, it would add theoretically a different dimension to the Blue Jays lineup. But I don't think it's an upgrade. I really don't think it's an upgrade in center field. I truly don't. I think there are other center fielders that they could obtain. And by moving Springer to right, the reason that's important is that you're probably adding 3 to 5 games that Springer can play because he doesn't have to cover as much ground. And Springer's just an aggressive outfielder. He plays hard, every single game. So if you can take a little wear and tear off that body, that's why the pursuit of a center fielder is so important. But Brandon Nimmo is not the answer. The only answer that Brandon Nimmo is what would be the worst free agent signing in the history of the Toronto Blue Jays? Then the answer would be Brandon Nimmo.
I just realized I was muted, which is a good thing because we're trying to keep this a family show. So I'll try again. Of all the bad contracts that the Blue Jays have handed out, and that's not to say that they're a terrible organization. Bad contracts happen. But wow, Brandon Nimmo, I mean, maybe because now he's the most sought after outfielder out there, maybe that contract escalates to the point where it is something that's not overly comfortable for the Blue Jays, certainly. But I have a hard time. Like, that's a bold statement, Steve. Worst contract in Blue Jays history, because there are some that, wow. Okay. So
would be a landslide.
A landslide. Wow. All right. That's fascinating. Because the projection is somewhere around the $140 million floor, and that's no small contract. And now I think that as names go off the board, I think you're going to find that contract kind of creeps up a little bit. One thing that, Karen, I wanted to mention to you, and we've got comments coming in fast and furious, by the way. I'll get to those here in a second. But Karen, something I wanted to throw to you. You look at Brandon Nimmo as somebody who can take over center fielder, move George Springer to right field, add a completely different approach at the plate from the left side. A lot of things make sense for the Blue Jays. One of the most important things is something that Christian brought up last night on the OK Baseball podcast, and he's actually saying it here again. He's watching. Nimmo is a great locker room leader. He would be a great asset for Toronto, just not sure the money is worth it. And so, Karen, I think that's what I wanted to throw to you with regard to Nimmo, is that clubhouse presence, because by all accounts, he is a great clubhouse guy. And we know that that's important to this front office. So, Karen, if all things being equal, and hearing what Steve had to say, and I have reservations about handing over $140, $150 million to somebody at his age, because really all we're doing is repeating the George Springer, because at some point he's going to have to move from center field as well. But Karen, all things being equal, I think that clubhouse thing kind of puts it over the edge as far as the fit for Toronto and Nimmo.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible. We know it's something that they've mentioned in the past with other players, and it just seems to me that he checks so many boxes. The offense is there, the defense is there. I'm not saying that he's a Gold Glover, but from what I've seen and heard, the numbers and all that he can play a decent center field. He's a left-handed hitter. We know the Jays want a good left-handed hitter. And I just think he ticks all of the boxes. And you know what? Maybe we can all agree that wherever Nimmo signs, whether that's with the Jays or whatever, that the end of the contract, but by the end of the contract, it's not going to be a good contract. I mean, we all pretty much know that. That's the free agency game. If you want someone to help you win now, and that someone is a free agent, chances are you're going to overpay as far as the life of the contract. But, I mean, I can't get out of my head, and it's only one person's opinion, so maybe that's all it is. But the article I read, I think it was, whoever wrote it, BP or something, and it talked about the best free agent fits for Nimmo, and it went in reverse order, and the Mets, And the only team he's ever played for were number 2. The Blue Jays were number 1. And they talked about how much it would cost them, both in terms of money. They would lose a draft pick and bonus pool room and all of that. And then it ended up saying nothing that should scare the Blue Jays off of what looks like it could be a finishing piece. I want a finishing piece. And if that's Brandon Nimmo, even if we're overpaying for him in 3 or 4 years, even if we ship him off to the Dodgers like they did with Russell Martin for the final year of his contract and eat most of his salary, if he has been that for us in the earlier years of the contract, then I'll take it.
Yeah, I think Karen brings up an interesting point in that I think that whatever happens, the context of the Blue Jays right now, I think you almost have to throw caution to the wind when it comes to acquisition cost, whether it's through free agency or even through trade. You have to be willing to pay more than you normally would because what you're getting means more than it normally would. So if you're looking at things like, I know we've been conditioned by this front office to look for, first of all, years of control. That's the first thing we look at now, regardless of how good a player is, whatever. Team control is the first thing anybody talks about now. And it wasn't like that before this front office took over. They've conditioned us to thinking that is almost the most valuable part of any player. So that's the first thing, right? And so then you look at controlling the cost of those years of control. And so obviously Major League Baseball prefers younger players because they have that team control. And so all of this to say the Blue Jays have never been in a spot where like the Dodgers have been. They haven't been like this in 20 something years, almost 30 years. Right? Like that's where my head is right now, that they're this close. You almost have to rethink value. You have to rethink cost, right? And to me, at this point, you look at who's available, what needs do I have? I need to get that player for this need. To hell with the cost. It costs what it costs, right? At this point, because you're so close. Right now, the Blue Jays are not playing for 6 or 7 years down the road. They're playing for 2023, 2024. Because in all honesty, that's all they're guaranteed, right? Because soon, Vladdy and Bo and those guys, Alek Manoah, those guys are all going to come up for extension talks and all of that stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm in a minority in that sense. I never have cared about how much a free agent costs. It's only money. I don't really care about that anyway. But now I care even less, which is why like the whole Justin Verlander thing was like, if that's who is going to get the Blue Jays over the top, go get them. Do whatever you need to do to get that person. I don't really care, which is interesting, right? I know it's not a very Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro approach. However, Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro are going to have to adjust their approach, in my opinion, which is why all of the names that we're going to talk about in this episode are so intriguing. Go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say that, Brandon Nimmo is the finishing piece. It's going to finish the Blue Jays' hopes to making the World Series this year. And if you're worried about the clubhouse presence, hire him as a clubhouse manager. Let him clean out the lockers, do laundry. That's fine. I have no problem with that. That's great. Okay, but to sign him, again, we're going to regret this contract by the first half of this season, not even worrying about the 4th and 5th year. It's just no one is going to change my mind on that.
Yeah.
And Brandon Nimmo is just the wrong answer at the wrong time for our team, and I just don't want to see it.
Yeah, and that's what makes this offseason so interesting to me, is that I have an opinion. Brandon Nimmo is the guy for the outfield, and Steve, you've got somebody else in mind, and everybody has an idea, right? And we're not only are we looking at what we would like, but we're also trying to think along with the team, and that's what makes this so much fun is that you're trying to think along with them and think like they do. And even though I just said they need to kind of change the way they've been thinking. But anyway, one of the other names, and this is kind of where we're getting into, and Rocket, like this is how often Rocket watches the show. Rocket's thinking right along with us because the next name we were going to talk about, Rocket already had. So we heard a rumor, and no, Steve is very versed in Pirates news, but Brian Reynolds seems like something, the perfect fit to bring in, and seems worth it. So, Steve, I'm going to throw it to you because Rocket's absolutely right. You are far more familiar with the Pittsburgh Pirates than either Karen or I. So, Brian Reynolds requested a trade, first of all. If they were going to trade him, his value just went down. So, he's very clearly a team player. But but go ahead, Steve. I want you to get your take on the fit between the Toronto Blue Jays and Brian Reynolds, the switch hitting outfielder. Go ahead.
Well, I will say that I believe that Brian Reynolds is looking out for himself because he doesn't want to be traded in mid-season. He does have a young family now. If you're going to trade me, and I would imagine that Cherington has had that discussion with him, saying that if we get an offer, you're going to go. So by him coming out, it does two things. It gets the Pirates off the hook because now Reynolds requested the trade, so they can say, look, obviously, and I know Derek Shelton was all over MLB Network today saying, well, I've talked to him. I know it's not going to affect his play if he stays in Pittsburgh, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, obviously, I think it's a little bit of mutual benefit for Brian Reynolds to come out and request the trade. That's the thing that amazes me because people are always talking about defense and defensive metrics. People are criticizing Brian Reynolds for playing a gigantic, spacious center field as having the lowest defensive rating. Brandon Nimmo is the second worst if you're going to go by defensive metrics. Okay, but no, again, defensive metrics are just, they might as well be like chicken bones that voodoo priest roll because they really don't really tell you what a player does on a game-to-game basis. Brian Reynolds checks off way more boxes for me than a Brandon Nimmo and even a Cody Bellinger to a certain degree, who obviously I'm a big proponent, go out and give Bellinger that 1-year deal because again, he is a switch hitter. You can move him around in the outfield if you're going to rotate, players through to give people a rest. He's probably going to, theoretically, he's a better left fielder. And left field at PNC Park, as Karen witnessed when she was here this past season when the Jays played in Pittsburgh, it's a pretty spacious outfield in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, Brian Reynolds theoretically would shift to left field if another center field option became available. But, and the Pirates only have one catcher on their 40-man roster. So you wouldn't necessarily have to give up your two younger catchers to get Brian Reynolds. Danny Jansen is the kind of guy that can work with the young pitching staff as he's demonstrated here. And I think he would bring more value to the Pirates if you were going to deal Brian Reynolds. So I think it would be terrific. And let all the analytic twits go off on a tangent all they want. Brian Reynolds is a excellent major league outfielder, both with the bat and in the outfield.
Fair enough. I'm going to exercise my rights as an English teacher and say he's an excellent outfielder. And I'm correcting your English, Steve. I'm sorry. It was in my head, and it was like one of those things where you just have to,
I speak New Jersey English,
Oh.
so there are no rules. There are no rules, and basically, the F word is punctuation in New Jersey. So I did hesitate using that. All right. So you got to forgive me my grammatical errors.
Fair enough. And as an English teacher, I tell my students all the time that I'm a wordsmith. That's what I do. And so we can take analytics and twits and just put them right together. Analytics, it's perfect. It doesn't roll off the tongue at all. But I'm telling you, buddy.
Well, add a Twittix.
and a Twitix. Done.
We
Done.
coined a new word.
Hashtag and a Twitix. I mean, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Blue Jays Nation. We now have our trending thing for 2023.
oh man. That's gold right there, and I'm going to I don't care who's listening to this right now. Jays from the Couch owns and it's
And a Twitix, right?
because
That's even funnier than Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube merging and coming up with you Twitface.
So, oh man. So let's bring it back here to Reynolds, Karen. The more I think about Brian Reynolds, the more I'm coming around to the idea. At first, I was like, "Whoa, his defense," as Steve mentioned, in last season was not good at all. But it was
analytics
better.
said that.
Yes,
his
that's right.
defense was excellent. But
Right. Outs above average and defensive run saved and all of that stuff, the voodoo stuff that Steve doesn't like. It says, Karen, that he had a bad year last year, defensively speaking. But as Steve pointed out, here I am screaming for Brandon Nimmo, who had the second worst defensive center field season. So, I mean, but Karen, the switch hitter, he's got power, on base ability. Like, this does seem like, if we're talking about a different element to the offense and to the lineup, this seems like a pretty good fit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Steve has seen him play. Obviously, seen him play a lot more than I have. I get scared off when I see these these bad numbers as far as defense. Like I said, I want someone. If this is going to be a finishing piece for the Blue Jays, I want someone who can play the outfield, preferably center field, someone who's either a left-handed hitter or a switch hitter, and who's good on both sides of the ball, the offense and the defense. And I don't know. I get really scared when I see numbers like that.
Mm-hmm.
That to me feels like me saying, well, forget about the numbers. Bo Bichette is a good defensive shortstop, and I've seen him make some terrific defensive plays. So if you just want the eyeball test, I'm not completely out of left field, but when you watch him day in and day out, he messes up more plays that he should make than he should. So
yeah.
I'm skeptical. If that's what they do, I'd be very scared.
Right. And the acquisition cost, of course, if it's Danny Jansen, who knows, maybe it could be something that, kind of expands the deal a little bit. Maybe it's centered around Brian Reynolds, but there are more pieces involved. But definitely Brian Reynolds is somebody to be paying attention to if you're a Blue Jays fan and looking at these winter meetings. That's one thing I'd be watching very closely. Something else I'll be watching very closely, when we kind of just talked about it, so it's a perfect segue. This is flowing very nicely, by the way, folks. Like, one topic right after another. They're all leading into each other. Even the people watching at home who don't even have our script in front of them are able to, like, predict where this is going. It's perfect. So let's talk about catchers, okay? First of all, I'm going to throw this out there. The Tampa Bay Rays apparently were in on Jacob deGrom. I cannot get my head around that. If anything, it was, hey, how much is it going to cost? Okay, thanks, bye. It's like the kid who goes up to the candy store and dumps their little bag on the do I have enough for this? No, you do not. Because that's essentially the answer that Tampa Bay got. However, I only bring I just picture them. Hey, mister. Anyway, but it brings us to the fact that I read that the Tampa Bay Rays are turning their attention to the catching position, including calling the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, of course, Steve, in typical Tampa Bay fashion, they want the younger team control. They want Gabriel Moreno, and obviously that is going to cost. It is going to cost dearly. For me, if I'm the Toronto Blue Jays and I'm giving up Gabriel Moreno to a division rival in the Tampa Bay Rays, who, let's be real, are close to the Blue Jays, somebody you are definitely going to be competing with This season, I'm starting with Shane McClanahan, and I don't care what the answer to that is. Steve, I know you and I have talked about this, and you are that's a non-starter, and that's okay with me because trading Gabriel Moreno to a division rival for less than Shane McClanahan is a non-starter for me. But I want to throw it to you, Steve, with regard to the Tampa Bay Rays and the catching, because that's hilariously fun to think about.
Yeah, and I don't see why that's such a scary thing. And what happened last night should be a perfect lesson to Toronto Blue Jay fans who were afraid about, oh, we have to play Gabriel Moreno, all these years. You traded a future Hall of Famer in Fred McGriff and your franchise shortstop in Tony Fernandez for Roberto Alomar and Joe Carter. I think it's fair to say that if they had kept McGriff and kept Fernandez, they would not have won back-to-back World Series, but Joe Carter and Roberto Alomar made that happen. So if you're getting a package of pitchers, and the Rays literally could field 2 major league pitching staffs with no drop-off whatsoever. I mean, they have so many prospects, especially with pitchers. You can address your immediate pitching needs. They have so many position players also down in the minors, including Apple. They could pick up 1 or 2 of those guys for Moreno. And you're improving your team in the now and in the future. So I don't understand what the big, oh, we can't trade him to a division rival, we got to play him. First of all, you're not going to play him as many times anymore thanks to that stupid new scheduling where, oh, no, we're only going to play teams in our division like 1.5 times. I'm going to play everybody else a bunch of times. It's not that bad, but I think you're you're losing 6 games division-wise every year now.
7.
So 7, yes. So it's not as big of a deal. And it doesn't matter. It's what you are bringing back and how that's making your team better. So if the cost is Gabriel Moreno, okay. I mean, if you are lengthening your pitching depth by bringing him, and again, you're not going to get McClanahan. Okay, you're not going to get. You know what? You might be able to get Glasnow. I mean, I think Glasnow would potentially be moved by Tampa Bay. But in essence, if you're adding to your pitching depth, and maybe adding to your positional depth in the minors, and you're giving up Moreno, I don't hesitate. I mean, I don't let Leander get off the telephone. I might ask him to take a lie detector test because obviously he knows information about players that nobody else ever does. So I think Ross would want to say, I want you to tell me the truth, but I want a polygrapher there. Okay. Because I want to make sure you're telling me the truth about this player. So other than that, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would not even give it a second thought. And I think Gabriel Moreno has a very bright future. I truly do. I don't know that it's as a catcher, but I mean, I really think he's got a bright future, and I'd hate to see him go. But if the goal is to get better now and also add some depth, you do it. You don't flinch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Karen, before I throw it to you, I think I'll qualify this by saying the only reason I have a problem with trading Gabriel Moreno to a division rival is the fact that if it were like the Boston Red Sox, it might be a little bit different for this coming season because I really believe that the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be competitive again. And if I'm the Toronto Blue Jays, I'm trying to improve my team, but I'm also not going to try and make their team better. Right? For me, that's the sticking point, and that's why I don't mind asking for Shane McClanahan. And if they say no, forget it, that is completely fine with me because there are lots of other teams who need a catcher who will pay, and I won't be helping a division rival. So that's, for me, that's why the division rival thing. If this was a team that was in my division but were terrible, it wouldn't mean as much. But this is the Tampa Bay Rays we're talking about. And Karen, finally, I know I said I was going to go to. I will add that if Tampa Bay wants this player, there's a reason. Keep them.
Mm-hmm.
Keep them. But Karen, your thoughts on the whole Gabriel Moreno or any catcher going to the Rays?
Right. I think it's a good thing that I'm not a general manager. I don't think I'd be a very good one. I get very attached to certain players and become very averse to the idea of trading them. And you know what? Maybe it's a good thing that I wasn't the Jays GM. Excuse my voice. In 1990 or 91 or whenever it is that they made the McGriff trade, and they did end up trading away a future Hall of Famer, as you said. But what they did probably helped get them a World Series that they might not have gotten like without making that deal. And why did they make that deal? Well, it was about what was coming back, but it was also the ability to replace what they were giving up. So they gave up Fred McGriff. They knew that they had John Olerud to step in and play that position. And as far as shortstop, apparently Pat Gillick had some inside information that Tony Fernandez was seriously considering retirement, which obviously didn't happen for a number of years. No, I mean, I saw that on a documentary video. It's about the Jays season and the big trade that led up to everything. So can you imagine if that had actually happened? They make that trade a year later. Fernandez has called it quits. So I mean, that's really a part, I think, of what made that trade palatable for the Blue Jays to make at that time. So do the Jays have a similar situation in that they've got two experienced MLB catchers, and you've got a prospect that's got a really high ceiling? So would it hurt the Jays potentially to trade away a Moreno as much as it would hurt almost any other team that doesn't have both Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk? In theory, he could be expendable. Myself, I don't want to trade Guerrero. I don't want to trade Bichette. I don't want to trade Manoah. And I'm almost as reluctant to trade away Moreno. I said something a couple of years ago, and I think I still believe it, and that is there is one player in baseball that I would be willing to trade Gabriel Moreno for, and it's not going to happen. And his name is sort of, why am I drawing a blank?
The suspense.
Sounds like
it sounds like somebody who won MVP 2 years ago when I was hoping for Vlad. Why am I drawing
Shohei Ohtani?
Thank you, Shohei Ohtani. I said that I'm not trading Moreno for anyone who's not named Ohtani. And
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen. But
Yeah,
I mean, the Rays have got this very deep farm system, but we don't really know how many of those guys, yes, they could go to other teams and they might grow into really good major leaguers, but if they go to a team that's trying to help, that is trying to win a World Series this year, I don't really know that that's the best fit. And trading them again to a division rival, to a team with the history of the Tampa Bay Rays, of the history against the Jays, with the Tampa Bay Rays. And to me, it's not so much that they play them now. It's 12 times this season. Thank God. And it's for every other division rival. I love that. But I mean, this is a team that could catch and pass them. If the Jays have aspirations of winning the division in 2023, they very well could. But you know what? So could the Tampa Bay Rays. And what if the Rays pass the Jays because of something that Moreno does for the Rays?
Yeah.
I don't want to be the author of that.
And if the Rays are seriously in on somebody like DeGrom, they're not messing around. They're going for it again this year too. So go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Now it's safe to say that you and Karen are now firmly in go for it this year, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Okay. What team in the major leagues has the most pitching depth, major league pitching depth? The Rays, correct?
Yeah.
You could acquire two pitching pieces in a trade for Moreno that are going to help you more this year than Moreno as the third string catcher will this year. That's why this particular deal is so attractive. Will you potentially regret it down the road? On some levels you could, but honestly, it is a match made in heaven. And the fact that it's the Rays, I don't think that it matters, because I really think that pitching they could acquire in a trade for Moreno will add more wins in the win column, not in the wins against replacement column, in the wins column than Moreno will this year,
Mhm.
2023.
Okay, so let's wrap this segment up, talking about catchers very quickly. No explanation whatsoever. There are three catchers that the Blue Jays have available, potentially in trade talks. So Danny Jansen, Alejandro Kirk, Gabriel Moreno. Steve, who's dealt?
Kirk.
Karen?
Danny Jansen.
I'm going to say Danny Jansen as well. And only because of this years of control thing. However, I also think that Alejandro Kirk might get you the biggest return.
That's why. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, though, that Gabriel Moreno could fetch you quite a nice return as well, because he also comes with that positional versatility that we know that the Blue Jays are going to try this coming year if they keep him, and that other teams would love, especially the Rays. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. So it's interesting. I say Danny Jansen, and Christian brings up this point as well. The Brewers or Marlins pitching could also be available too. Solid depth there if the division trading is what's stopping you. Oh my God, this is amazing that the people watching are able to chime in with comments that are actually coming up right after we read their comments. This is fantastic. That tells you the kind of people we have watching our show, right? They're in tune with what's going on here on the couch. Because the very next topic was going to be the Marlins. Okay, the Marlins need a catcher. They're not going to be satisfied with Stallings as their catcher coming into this 2023 season. I think they're going to want to get better. They're in a tough division. You know, the Mets just added Justin Verlander to go along with Max Scherzer. It's like the Detroit Tigers of old. That's going to be a significant duo. They're up against Alex Anthopoulos in Atlanta. It's going to be a dogfight. The Phillies are not they're not letting up after their World Series appearance, so it's going to be tough. So the Marlins have to get better. If they really believe that they have no shot, then I think that it's time to start trading off some of that pitching depth, because outside of the Rays, Steve, I think the Marlins have some of the more attractive starting pitching options that are available that we know could be had out there. So when you look at it, they've already said anybody but Sandy Alcantara, 2022 Cy Young Award winner, they'll listen on, which is interesting, Barry, because the Mets traded their Cy Young winner to the Blue Jays not too long ago. Wouldn't it be great if Miami followed suit? Except probably if this were to happen, it would have better results than R.A. Dickey and his friggin' knuckleball. But anyway.
Don't get me started.
See, I knew it. I knew we would not agree on R.A. Dickey. But let's talk about some Miami pitching, Steve. You've got Pablo Lopez potentially available. You've got, Rogers, who's coming off a terrible season this past season, but finished second in Rookie of the Year voting the year before that. I have to think that if you're the Miami Marlins, you're going to look to try and capitalize on your return to get some bats, some offense going, or even a catcher. So, Steve, when you look at the Miami Marlins roster, do you see a fit here with the Toronto Blue Jays?
Oh, I do. And then when you were talking about catchers, that's where Danny Jansen goes. Because I think that Danny Jansen and Jacob Stallings are exactly the kind of catching tandem you want with a young pitching staff. So even though Kirk's bat is attractive, Moreno's long-term future I think is attractive, Danny Jansen helps that team capitalize on its pitching right away in tandem with Jacob Stallings. If you take Jansen out, there's no defensive drop back whatsoever with Jacob Stallings. Jacob Stallings may be the best defensive catcher in baseball. He just can't hit a barn. It's unfortunate. Watching Anna Eng today on MLB Network from the winter meetings, the fact that she almost never mentioned Pablo Lopez tells me that Pablo Lopez is really the arm that they would like to move. That's not a knock on what they feel his value is, But just like we talked about with the catching, where Kirk could bring you back a better package, I think Lopez at this point brings you back a better package than Rodgers would, for example, because of what he did the last season and a half. It's demonstrated what he can do. Now, if you're talking about a team like the Rays or the A's, okay, yeah, then you're looking at Rodgers or some of their other younger pitchers down there. But I think there's absolutely a fit. I think they could move a decent offensive player like a Biggio or a Otto Lopez or even an Espinal. I think they could do that. In those interviews, I don't think they're going to trade any of their infielders coming back. I know, Shaun, you had a great article where they talked about John Birdie coming back. I don't think he's going anywhere based on the way they've been talking about him. I don't think he's just available anymore. But certainly, I think there is a match with the Marlins pitching. And I don't know necessarily about bullpen pieces, but I think everybody here is looking more for starters now at this point. So I would think that there would definitely be a match.
Yeah, I mean, the John Birdie would be a nice little addition as a bench piece on a championship team, man. He would and it's too bad that the Blue Jays let him go, a few years ago or whatever. But in a sense, it's a blessing because now he's able to establish himself as a big league player, right? I would love him as an extra piece in a deal with the Marlins, a Pablo Lopez and a John Birdie. Obviously, that's going to cost a bit more than Danny Jansen. I'm well aware. I'm not suggesting that that it's going to go like that. But I think the Marlins, they match up very well, Karen, with the Blue Jays, simply because when you look at both teams and their their area of depth, right? We've got the Blue Jays in the catching situation, and I love this idea of Biggio as well being added in there because let's be real, the Blue Jays have no intention of doing anything with Kevin Biggio.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right. Absolutely right, and Karen, I'm with you. Like ever since the beginning, I've been in love with Kevin Biggio, the ball player. But in my opinion, the Blue Jays have mishandled him to the point where now he's a bench player for them, and not even their first option as a bench player. Like that's where we are, right? So if they can include him and Miami can get him some everyday playing time, even though John Birdie and is kind of occupying the second base for them. There's that, right? But if they can get him average playing time, everyday playing time, he's going to hit for power. He's going to get on base. We know this. And he's going to play good defense at second base. That's a solid player, except for the Blue Jays, he's just kind of lost his spot, really. So anyway, Karen, when you look at these positions of depth, right, how do you see that matchup playing out with Miami? Because they've become almost like regular trading partners at this point, right? So, Karen, do you see something happening by the end of these winter meetings between these two clubs?
That's a good question. I would love to see the Blue Jays add to their team sooner than later. And I mean, the winter meetings, they wrap up not too long from now, doesn't it? Go until the end of Wednesday or something?
Well, Thursday, I think is
Okay.
the Rule 5 draft. I think is Thursday.
Okay, so even so after today, you're looking at 3 more days. I'd love to have some good news to make me feel a little better, as the off season drags on. I think what's going to happen, probably because I'm hearing a lot of chatter about Sean Murphy. So I think probably he'll get traded first, wherever that is. And then I don't know if Contreras will get signed soon after or whatever, but I think at least one or two of those pieces will be off the board. And then other clubs who really want to upgrade catcher, it's like, okay, what's our best option? Let's call Toronto. But yeah, I mean, I've seen good things about Lopez and his numbers and all of that. I think adding him to a pitching staff that already has Manoah and Guzman, and I still believe in Barrios. I think he's going to bounce back and be pre-2022 Barrios again. That's a pretty solid 1 through 4, and it should make the Jays very hard to beat most nights, and then they just got to figure out what the heck to do with the fifth spot. But that's a whole other question. So yeah, I'm
Right.
very interested. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors, and I'm very interested in actual facts. Let's see where Sean Murphy goes, and then presumably that team is off the board as far as the Jays catchers go, and see who's left.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
cheers.
Yeah, and the one thing I think, and maybe this might be a good note, there's a couple of things that I'll point out here. That first of all, we have, excuse me, we have this issue of there's something that's so obvious right now. Like last year, it was Matt Chapman playing third base for the Blue Jays. That happened. It took a while, but it did happen. And then we have now the Marlins and the Blue Jays. It seems so obvious that it's almost too obvious to the point where you're actually wondering if this is even going to happen. And the other thing I would say is that you have Ross Atkins now in a position where he actually has some kind of leverage in the catching position. And I can't get my head around whether or not it's a good idea to see how the other chips fall. I can't get my head around whether or not that's an acceptable approach. Certainly, when you have three pieces of let's be real, you've aside from the two that you mentioned, Karen Murphy and Contreras, like you have the three best available, three of the five available options across Major League Baseball. It seems to me that's a position of leverage from which you can be aggressive, but here we have the approach now is to wait and see, right? I don't know. I can't get a sense of if there is a wait and see approach here. Let's slow play things and use other deals to bounce this one off of or whatever have you. So I guess Steve, I'm only bringing this up to lead to the final question for the show. Steve, do you see in the winter meetings? We've already seen big deals happen, today and even last night. So I guess, Steve, the question to you is, do you see the Blue Jays actually pulling something off, finalizing something, getting it across the finish line, announcing something before these winter meetings end?
I do, and I think I just got an alert while we were talking here. Sean Murphy, it's either the Braves or the Red Sox, and it's probably going to get done tonight. So he would be potentially off the board. But see, that plays into the Blue Jays being quasi-patient. Again, during the meetings, there can be some patience. After the meetings, then I get angry. But by Murphy being the first guy to go, now the Cardinals are, and the Marlins and the Pirates and other teams looking for catchers. Now they're really even the Cubs really need. I don't know if the Cubs have pieces to come back, for a catcher. But all of these, teams are now in play, and it's horrible to have to sit and wait to see what other teams are doing. But I think in this particular case, Atkins, Shapiro, who's ever actually making the calls now, I think are being smart to not do anything first as far as the catchers go, because I think they wanted to see some of the bigger pieces get moved first before they made their move. So I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a trade made. And as long as that, I don't know that there's going to be a free agent signing finalized, but I do think there'll be a trade made, and it might not be what we are all hoping for. And I'm not even sure that the outfield is going to be the place that they get addressed right away. But I do think some kind of impactful trade will happen during these winter meetings. Yes, assuming that Ross Atkins actually did make it to the winter meetings.
Right.
There's rumors that he hasn't gotten there yet, but again, it's just rumors. It's in the Twitter sphere, so you can't take it as truth.
Well, I mean, he may just be taking the wait and see approach to getting there, right? Maybe a cheaper flight will pop up if I just go through New Mexico or whatever, right?
Yes, he put in his planner winter hibernation, not winter meetings. So he was a little confused, and he's trying to catch up now. Mark called him, hey, where the hell are you? Now he's trying to catch up, but it's okay.
I
Classic
heard someone
Ross.
spotted him at the zoo.
Oh, jeez. I don't know how to run this show if both of you are dumping on Ross Atkins. I don't know how to do this. Anyway, Karen, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. Do you see something happening by the end of these winter meetings? And if so, what do you feel that is?
Um, I want them to do something. Like I said, I want some good news. I want something to return to feeling sunny about. And darn it, I need some material for my show on Thursday, and I don't have very much. But if I'm going to try to put my realistic hat on, I'd have to, if I could win some money by betting correctly, I'd have to say no, they're not going to do anything this week. That they'll
Mhm.
get things done like prior to opening day, quite a bit prior to opening day, but
Right.
I don't feel like it's going to be this week. But I mean, Steve, you know what? What I think has zero bearing on what's actually going to happen. So
It's true. But I got to tell you, if Ross Atkins makes me wait all friggin' winter, and then he addresses his needs, and like right before spring training starts or during spring training, I myself we will all form the anti-Ross coalition. I am not going to spend all winter wringing my hands and watching this player and that player and this player go off the board, and Ross Atkins sitting back and saying, well, we're just trying to get the best. Shut the hell up. Your best value is to fill the holes. Anyway, so I'm going to save that, though. I know it felt like I was just getting, like, it was all coming out now. I'm saving it, but that was just a taste, Ross. So anyway, it's interesting that we say this because Rocket, thankfully, Rocket is not recording a podcast and can keep us up to date on things that are happening while we record. But Bleacher Report just reported 5 minutes ago that Toronto is in on Brian Reynolds and the price tag is increasing. Eek, but exciting. I agree, exciting. I'm not excited about the price continuing to increase, but we don't know what that means, right? That could mean, Ross Atkins said, I'll give you, Kevin Biggio for Brian Reynolds, and then obviously that they would have to increase that. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see a free agent signing at these winter meetings, but I would probably expect a trade is more likely at this point, because I think that there are just so many holes to fill. It's almost more controllable in a sense to pull off a trade. And maybe, players are also going to hold out for X number of dollars as well and all of that stuff. So I think teams will probably work together quicker. That's just how I see it playing out. But I also wouldn't be surprised, Karen, to see it just nothing happened. We laid the groundwork. Right. Good. Because San Diego had no streets whatsoever. They needed all the pavement to be laid. Right. Like, come on, groundwork. You don't know. Anyway.
Brandon Drury?
For what?
He's a free agent.
I don't care. He can stay one.
I was just wondering.
Oh, Steve, you can't drop Brandon Drury's name at the end of a podcast episode and expect me to be like, okay, see you later. We're done now.
I read an article not that long ago, the best free agent at every position, and they had Brandon Drury at third base. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, is Shaun reading this? Because his head's going to explode.
No, because he would never read anything from that person ever again. Rocket has a nice one here. This will be our closing comment. Rocket would like to see Carlos Rodon signing. I would love that as well. I would be shocked if that happens. I think if the Blue Jays are going to go shopping at the high end of the free agent thing, I think it was for Justin Verlander or Jacob deGrom, which was never going to happen, by the way. deGrom was never going to happen. I would be surprised if they spend the kind of money and years that it would take to get a Rodon. But you know what? If he waits for too long, he may have to. So who knows? Anyway, I want to thank everybody for the comments. These were fast and furious coming in. We weren't even supposed to do a show tonight. Steve had an excellent idea. We should talk about the winter meetings, and it was a great idea, and I'm glad we did it. But the fact is, we didn't advertise this show at all, and we still have lots and lots and lots of comments and participation. So I want to thank you all so much for that, to Rocket and Christian. Excuse me, and to Drixley as well, who, by the way, is not put off by our Ross Atkins slander. So,
Drixley,
I mean,
my man.
Whatever keeps them coming back. But in all seriousness, thank you, everybody, for tuning in and commenting as well. We really do appreciate it. We go when we finish the show, we always go off air and we talk about just how great the show was or whatever. And then that's the first thing we always talk about is the interaction. It's fantastic. So thank you for that. And to, of course, my friends, my people, Karen and Steve, I want to thank you for just throwing together a Monday night and saying, you know what, screw it, we'll watch TV later and let's talk Blue Jays baseball. So thank you both for doing that. I really do appreciate it.
And just two quick plugs. Obviously, Karen's going to have her show Thursday, and she can kind of wrap up the winter meetings for us. And I really think that if something doesn't happen, we're going to have to change the name of her show. I don't think it's going to be Sunny Side of the Dome anymore. But also, I'm going to be interviewing a potential Atkins replacement tomorrow. We're going to have a guest shadow general manager tomorrow on Beyond Pick Circle. So I encourage everybody to tune in.
That's right. It's going to be good watching for sure. I can't wait to I'm not even going to try and plug it. I'm just going to say it's going to be awesome. So anybody who's watching should be tuning into that. And make sure, of course, you tune into Sunny Side of the Dome Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got a lot going on. The Blue Jays are continuing to go through their offseason, and we're going to continue to cover it as always, whether it's on the website, jaysfromthecouch.com, or here on the podcast. We're going to continue up to date all winter long. Maybe just give us a move or a signing or something like that to help us out. But until then, for Steve, for Karen, for everybody at Jays from the Couch, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFTC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.
Wait.